All right, so here's another silly example of some animation here. We're doing this exercise today to try and master how our animation data works. So what we're going to be doing is taking any of the data that you've actually animated in the past. I will say that it's going to be easier if it's one of the objects and not an actual armature, just for this exercise. And we're going to append it to a brand new scene, and then we're going to apply it to two different objects and make two small changes. We're going to offset it on one of the channels that hasn't been animated, and then we are going to split our animation data and offset it on a channel that has been animated. So that way we've technically made two animations out of the one. But as I said, this is all just to get you used to how the animation data system works. All right, let's get started. So for this example, what I'm going to do is take my old animation, this square traveling in a square, and I'm going to append this to a new file and attach it to a monkey, all for the purpose of trying to master my animation data. Here is the old file that I am starting with. You can start with whatever you've animated in the past, but just remember that the data will need to match. So if you're animating something on the object level, the location, rotation, or the scale, it's not going to easily transfer over to an armature, say, for example, and vice versa. If you've animated the armature, it's not going to transfer over to the just a plain old object. There are ways to do it, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're going to be talking about in this course. All right, so here we are. I'm going to change my graph editor over to the action editor. Now, if it happens to be the dope sheet, don't forget you can just change it here. So the first thing I'm going to do before I save it and append it into a new file is name my data. So I'm going to call this square in square. Okay, so now I'm going to save it. So file, save as. I'm going to hit the plus button twice, which is going to increment my file number, just because I started on number 1 and I don't know what my number 2 is, so I don't want to save over it. So let me just save that. So now I've got this nice and saved. I'm going to start a new file. So go File, New, General, and I'm going to choose the layout. So let me choose the layout here. So this is probably what you'll be looking at. And I'm also going to bring up a little window here. So let's right click and go horizontal split. I'm going to make this one my dope sheet. Of course, the dope sheet will be the first one that we open, and then I'm going to change it to the action editor. So here it is blank. All right, so before I go any further, I'm going to save this new file. So file, save as, and let's call this mastering my data. Mastering my data. And I'll give it a trailing underscore of a 01, just so that in case I need to increment, I can just push the plus button really quickly and incrementally save my file. All right, so I'm ready to start. I will delete this and add a monkey. So Shift A, mesh monkey. And now I'm going to append in my data. So I'm going to go File, Append, and I'm already in the same folder here that I was working on. Remember, I called it looping cue number 3. Let's drill down into that action, and there we go, square in square. So now I'm going to select our monkey and then apply this action that I have appended in. So in my action editor, in the menu here, you'll see it has 0 users. If I click square in square, I now have this active in my viewport. Ta-da! So there's actually a reason why I only like to use the channels that we're using for all of our animations and then leaving the no animation on the other channels. Well, one reason is it keeps your dope sheet and your graph editor nice and tidy. And another reason is you can actually offset things that aren't keyed. And I'll just show you what I mean now. So I'm going to add in let's just add in a circle. So Shift A, add in a mesh. Let's go UV sphere. I said circle, but I meant a sphere. And I'm going to apply this same action, but I'm going to offset it without editing any of my animation data. What? Is that possible? Yes, it is. So I've got this here. I'm going to select our action to apply. I'm going to call this square in square. And now you'll see if I play my animation, they're doing the exact same thing. Oh, and remember that we have actually got some modifiers applied to this, which is why it keeps looping. You'll see that if I go to the graph editor, you'll see that, yeah, it's going to continue on and on forever because I have those cycles applied. So let's change back. So now what I want you to do is actually offset one of the channels here. So we can actually separate them. They're not all in the same location. So I can actually move any one of these objects off in space on one of these channels that isn't animated. So let's just move it back, 4 meters back. And now when we play, these are now still using the same animation data, but they're not on top of each other. So that is one of the other things that I wanted to show you. So let's just change this one, negative. Let's just make this one -2. Let's move it around. Okay, so now this is still not keyed. And remember, one thing that we don't want to do is actually key this value now. Because if we do, let's just key it. Let's go to an actual keyframe and hit I. Now when we scrub, it's going to snap to that location. Now why did it do that? That is because this channel is now keyed and they're sharing the same data. So let me undo that, and you'll see let me undo that twice, and you'll see, yeah, it is back the way that I wanted. Now, for the sake of this demo, I am actually going to split these animation datas into 2 separate ones, just so that I can offset them on one of the channels that is already being animated. So you saw I could animate on the Y channel, and we'll actually offset it on the white channel without too much of a hassle. But now let's offset it on the X channel, which is the left and the right, as viewed from the front. So I'm going to click my button here to make whatever object I have selected as its own copy. So I'm just going to click this number 2, and now that has created a copy of that. So let's call this sphere in square, because it's no longer the square shape. Let's just call it sphere in square. It's a weird name, I know, but that's what we're going with today. And now we're going to offset everything together. So I'm going to jump over to the graph editor, which will make it easier. And I'm going to hide my Z channels. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to make sure that all my channels here are selected, and then I can either move them up or down. So I'm going to move them to the right, screen right, and I'm going to hold down Control. That's going to snap it to an incremental value, so if I snap it up, it's going to move it 1 value in the positive direction, which is to the right. So there we go. Let's now play our animation, and you can see that they've started from the same point in animation data wise, but they're doing their own thing. Now this is the type of thing that I want you to do for this exercise. Take one of your old animations, append it to a new file, offset it using a channel that isn't animated. I did mine on the Y channel, and then split it and move all your curves together and offset it on one of the channels that is animated. So this isn't a practical example of something that you might do in the real world of animation, but it will teach you to understand the concepts behind how all this data fits inside Blender. And that's what we've tried to do today. So I look forward to seeing you master this animation data, and I'll see you in the next video.